Hi everyone, welcome to the IGB webinar brought to you together with ICE 365. My name is Eva Bakun, I'm the Director of Industry Insight and Engagement for Client Gaming. Today's webinar is the first content piece in a whole series of content that will focus on the global land-based industry and will be called International Casino Content Series, and that's coming up to you next week. This content series, International Casino Content Series, will be part of the newly launching ice365.com website, which is launching on the 28th of June next week. That is really our way to provide you with digital touch points throughout the year with the whole of the ICE community. Again, coming up next week, launching 28th of June with some exciting content pieces, including an exclusive interview with Gary Loveman, a piece on the newly launching Resorts World Casino, just really opening as the first casino in a decade on the Las Vegas Strip. Interviews with the ECA board and a lot of other really exciting content. So that's happening next week. Today, as the world slowly reopens, so do the casinos, and that's what we're going to be talking about with our experts. Before I hand over to our moderator, Dan Waugh, I just wanted to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and you will be able to listen to it or share with your colleagues in a couple of days' time when the recording is available. And also, you can put forward your questions throughout the webinar. We'll be picking them up and sending them through to our experts. Please use the questions functionality of the webinar platform. So that's it from me. Enjoy the webinar, and I'm leaving you in a very skillful and expert hands of our moderator, Dan Waugh. Dan, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Eva, and good afternoon, everyone. We're fortunate to be joined today by three leading lights from the casino and gaming universe. We have Beretta Barbanel from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. We have Simon Thomas from London's iconic Hippodrome Casino, and we have David Williams from the Rank Group, which is Britain's largest casino operator. I think even possibly even Europe's largest casino operator. So we are. I just thought I'd start off, for anyone that's feeling a little bit nostalgic for lockdown, and to anyone that's forgotten what the last 15 months have been like. But if we just have the next slide. So, who would have guessed 18 months ago that playing around in masks and perspex would have been a thing outside the S&M scene? But this is where we are. Next slide. We've had curfews and COVID marshals, and this chap here on the left is peering into the Hippodrome to make sure that Simon isn't running any illicit games. Fortunately, Simon was running his illegal blackjack game on the top floor, so this chap missed it. Next slide. Even Las Vegas has been hit hard. Here you can see, I think it's either the win or the encore maybe, looking a lot like Las Vegas in Blade Runner 2049. Just one little chap with his overnight suitcase crossing the boulevard. And looking at it through numbers, this is just Britain, so apologies to Brett, but looking at numbers, we can see gaming revenue in Britain's casinos absolutely nosedived from the commencement of lockdown last year, both in terms of table games and machines, harder hit than any other part of the UK gambling industry. And just to reinforce this, to add to the sort of gloom that Simon and David are feeling, and their sort of post-traumatic stress disorder here. Next slide. We can see that in context of, you know, the casino market versus other verticals in the British gambling market, and also in terms of the gaming duty that Treasury has received. Next slide. So in May, casinos started off down the road to recovery, which is our theme. Simon even had to break into his own casino with a set of bolt cutters. But with the Prime Minister now suggesting that no more lockdowns didn't exactly mean no more lockdowns, what does this mean for the sector? And what does it look for like for recovery both in Britain and over the Atlantic in the USA? And we'll now open up, I think, with perhaps go to Mr. Braken himself, Mr. Simon Thomas. Simon, as traumatic as that intro may have been, what's the last 15 months like been for you? Have there been any bits as well?
Any what, sorry?
Have there been any positive aspects of the last 15 months?
Yes and no. It's funny, we've been open, not with counting, we've been open for 5 weeks, 1 day and 15 hours and 9 minutes. And it's very easy to forget how horrendous that period was. It was horrid, it was scary, it was stressful. There were times when I was really thinking, is there going to be a future for the Hippodrome? It's when we were always behind the drag curve with the furlough schemes. And there were plenty of times that you had no clarity that there was a future for the business. Now, obviously, we would have always found a way. I mean, it's something I put so much time, money, and emotion into. It really hurt. And it was horrendous going back into sleepless nights again. Now, clearly, the government had been dealing with a big problem. It's killed a lot of people. They had to make tough choices. But it was just particularly upsetting when many were not backed by science. They were knee-jerk, they were damaging, particularly to casinos with things like unnecessary furloughs. And it's been stressful for the team and also our customers. And we are glad it is passing, it has to be said. The financial damage has been massive. Some casinos have not survived. So we're pleased to be in relatively good shape and looking forward. In terms of taking positives out of it, we've used the time in the best way we could. There was an opportunity in lockdown to do disruptive work and also restructure our workforce, both of which we took. And obviously the most physical example we've expanded our roof terrace to create one of the most impressive skyline leisure and hospitality venues. We've refurbished one of our casino areas. All our poker rooms have been redone. And we've made some structural changes, including putting a very large hole through an extremely thick wall, something we would not have relished to doing without lockdown. On the staff, we've made a number redundant. We've restructured the remainder. And I think it's all left us leaner and better prepared for the future. And we're pleased that our customers have come back, but we just don't need any more messing about by the government with unnecessary and damaging curfews. You're on mute, Dan, and lockdowns.
Sorry. Thanks, Simon. I should have mentioned at the start that we do have David Williams of Rank with us in voice, if not in body, because we're having some technical difficulties patching his imagery. But if I could ask the disembodied voice of David Williams as well, without turning this into a casino's comfort and support session. David, how's it been for you?
Thank you, Dan, and apologies that I can't get my web camera to work, but I can get my mute button to work, Dan, so that's 1-1. It's been demoralising, it's been frustrating, it's been all of those things that Simon has said, and we've been left with some bruises, and I think at various times throughout 2020, there's always an element of, well, hang on, is this an industry crying wolf? Is it actually as bad as that they're making out? And Simon and I have lost count of the number of sort of letters and correspondences that we've made to government. As Simon says, casinos have failed. A number of casinos have closed and simply will not reopen. And there's only just over 100 casinos in the UK. So the damage has been done. At Rank, we had to go to shareholders in November last year for an equity raise, a successful equity raise. But that's pretty much how precarious it was. So we look back with absolutely no fondness, other than, dare I say it, all of the sort of revenue damage and the impact on the bottom line. The loyalty and the resilience of colleagues going through it together is something that I think businesses will, not just casinos, will have to hold on to and try to harness in the, I've no doubt, the challenging months ahead.
Thanks, David. And Brett, if I can ask you, obviously we're British, it rains in our summers, we haven't won the World Cup since 1966. We're generally a pretty dour nation. We even lost you guys about 250 years ago. So can you, are things better in America? Have things been a bit more upbeat? What's Vegas like?
Well, yes, to provide hopefully hope for the future. For so long, when it came to gambling, a lot of what we would talk about in the United States is look to the UK, look to Europe, that's the trajectory we'll be on. And especially as sports betting has grown, that's certainly been the case here. And now I hope that as some of this recovery goes on, we are fully open here in Nevada as of June 1st. And there are a number of casinos that are now fully open. There are others opening later this week. We have a brand new property on the Strip opening. Resorts World opens in 2 days. There are others that are set to come July 1. So I hope that finally we're able to say we're the trajectory that eventually the UK will be on when it comes to reopening. But I will say that, like Simon and David, the past 15 months have been an absolute roller coaster. We went through incredible dips. When we look back to about 2006, the Las Vegas Strip generated about, gosh, I know this is British, but is it okay if I use US dollars as my frame of reference? Excellent. I never know quite what that exchange is going to be. We generated about $570 million in monthly gaming revenue in 2006. We then hit a recession. We then hit a bit of growth. There were a number of casinos, the Fontainebleau, for example. I remember for years, leading into probably around 2013, 2014, there was a giant sign outside the Fontainebleau that said opening fall 2009. And that was always just sort of a fun joke that we would toss aside over there. But then things started to come back. By 2020, things still weren't even quite back by then. We were averaging about 300, 310 in monthly or million in monthly gambling revenue. And then we shut down the entire Strip. Properties that had never closed before had to shut their doors. Some of them didn't have locks, so we had to figure out how to board up doors because we didn't know how to lock the doors on these buildings. But now things are back. I mean, we look at some of these, and I read a report from, I think it was McKinsey a couple months ago, and how much has changed in a few months, because they were talking about how it would take until maybe 2030 before Las Vegas and more broadly the US gambling market would it'd need about that much time to come back. And now in April, these are the most recent numbers we have, April surpassed in the state of Nevada, $1 billion in revenue. That's a benchmark. That's only happened, I think that was the third time in Nevada history that's been done. So the interest to come back, there's a clamor for tourism. Memorial Day weekend, which is usually the last weekend in May, is really the entry into summer for most of America. And Las Vegas was the #1 destination during that weekend. And so things are certainly coming back here, and they're coming back with a gusto. I don't know if this is a sustainable level, but these lockdowns, as Simon has said, it's easy to forget, but at the same time, they've left a lasting mark, and to the desire to come out of that stronger is not just on the business side, it's on the consumer side as well.
Thanks, Brett. And you also, I guess it was quite a frustrating period for UNLV because you were just on the cusp of opening your incredible new Blackfire facility at the university when COVID hit. But that's up and running again now, isn't it?
It is, yes.
It's worth having a look if you get a chance. Right. And Eva's just put a note up to remind you, audience members, please do fire in your questions, partly because I tipped off David and Simon and Brett what questions I'll be asking them. So it's far more amusing if we get some curveballs in. David, you mentioned how the industry's pulled together. Have you had much of a sort of international dimension to that? Is there a sense that the industry's pulled together globally as well as at a domestic level?
Look, I think so. It's been fascinating, sort of looking beyond our shores to see what has been happening. I think one of the key spaces in which this has been relevant has been on things like curfew. I think Simon mentioned earlier when we were sort of hit with curfew in late summer, autumn last year. We kind of instinctively knew that it was going to be awful. Over half of casino revenues are generated after 10 o'clock. And then we started sort of looking overseas just to see what was happening, particularly in Europe, to see what approaches governments were taking. And I think there were times when that added to our frustration, because it certainly felt as if certainly parts of Europe were more advanced in their reopening and more limited in the restrictions that were being put in place on the business. I think what the casino sector has going for it in spades is that there is an awful lot of cross-referencing. There is an awful lot of common ground. And, you know, that's something that's been borne out in the last, probably within the last sort of 12 to 15 months.
Okay. And Simon, I appreciate, you know, prophesying the future is tricky, but you do inhabit a building where, you know, Harry Houdini used to chip along for the odd gig. So looking into your crystal ball, what does recovery look like? And also, to what extent do you think anything has changed for good as a result of what we've been going through?
I love all these comments about the new normal and whatever. We know we don't live in a normal world. We will never get back to normal because we are in the Hippodrome. There's no such thing as normal. We're always changing, we're always improving, always tweaking. And the COVID period has been incredibly disruptive, but we'll find a way to optimize whatever the post-COVID period is, and we'll create our own version of normal. It's much better to be in control. We'll obviously come out of it leaner, we're more efficient, we've got a better product, we've got a lot in the pipeline. Now, obviously, there's lots of talk of will people come back to offices, and of course they will. The creativity, the mentoring, the efficiency, the spark that comes from people being together. We're social animals. And so there's a value is there, not for companies to help support us, but for companies themselves to get people back into the office. And we will benefit from that. Now, obviously, there will be more working from home. I think some people, when they realize that if they can work from home all the time, they can be offshored, it'll change their attitude a little bit. But I don't think people, when they were in London, went out 5 nights a week. So if they're working in an office nearby here 3 nights a week, they might have gone out 3 times a week. They might continue to go out 3 times a week. So we'll just find the benefits of whatever the opportunities are. So we're not scared about the future, other than the government and meddling, because the uncertainty they put into everything is just so damaging. And just picking up something that David was saying about the collegiate working, I think that's actually one benefit out of this whole process. The level of cooperation and coordination between Britain's casinos has been excellent, and we all know each other much better. And we've had great support from the international, particularly the European Casinos Association, and a shout out to them, and also to Brett and the colleagues at UNLV. I think it's brought the whole industry closer together, and that will help give us resilience for the future.
Great, thanks. And looking forward, staying with the theme of looking forward and looking back, and also the theme of uncertainty, we have a once-in-a-generation review of gambling legislation in train, and the government has sort of put casino modernisation within the scope of that review. To what extent, I'll ask perhaps David first, and then come to Simon, and then come to Brett on this. But to what extent do you think the last 15 months and the damage caused by the coronavirus emergency and the limitations exposed, to what extent do you think that has made the need for meaning reform even more critical? David?
Yeah, well, look, I think even without the pandemic, it was critical. And what's interesting is, you know, in the discourse, there's an awful lot of talk about the government firing the starting gun in December 2020 on this. I have to say, I think for the casino sector, that gun was fired about 8 years ago, and we're now at a stage where the timing is, and the pandemic of course has crystallized it, is absolutely critical. The context of this, of course, is that the last Gambling Act in 2005 effectively, I won't go into all the details, but it started an experiment for the casino industry in the UK that has stalled. I mean, it's ultimately stalled. It was supposed to be reviewed in 2013. Here we are 16 years on, and it simply hasn't happened. And that has been frustrating. It's left the land-based casino sector left behind. I think what it does, though, is show that we've been making consistent arguments, not just in the last 6 months, but for well over 6 years, for much, much longer than that, actually. And the need for change that makes our venues appealing to customers has never been more important. If we don't secure the change this time around, we head into the abyss of having venues that are constrained by archaic, obsolete restrictions. And that's not about us as operators being more profitable. It's about simply giving casinos the kind of experience that anyone who has visited a casino outside of the UK will be used to. And anyone who has visited casinos inside the UK, with some notable exceptions, Simon's Leicester Square venue being one, is pretty frustrated by, because we have been left behind, and now is the time to sort that. All that the pandemic did was bring that into sharp and pretty painful crystallization.
Thanks. Simon, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's one of the ironies of coronavirus that the government is saying go cashless and use automated machines wherever you can. And whereas in casinos where we're not allowed to use cashless, we're only allowed 20 slot machines, and that forced customers and staff to actually interact. Now, obviously, that was particularly bad in the days when they were saying you catch COVID by touch. Now, all the regulation, all the evidence says you can't, so that's some of that worry's gone. But the reforms we're seeking, they're common sense. They're based on what our customers tell us they want. Our customers want to be able to play slot machines. We're only allowed 20, which for me is 1 to 80 customers at peak times. We can't play blackjack at low stakes because we're not allowed automated blackjack with an RNG. We can't do cashless. These are all fairly simple things to address. They can all be done by secondary legislation. So I think we're looking, and we, I think, have got a lot of sympathy from the legislators, which will come to our aid in the next few months. There will be a few bumps in the road because there will be the hostile anti-gambling rhetoric, which we'll get caught up in. But I think most sensible regulators, and indeed quite a lot of the anti-gambling people, realize that the land-based casinos are probably the sort of gambling they do want, and the amount of tax we pay is very welcome to the government as it recovers. So I think we're in as good a position as we've ever been in terms of getting what we want and what we need to keep our customers happy.
Thanks, Simon. And Brett, you mentioned in your response earlier that sports betting has been a big thing, and I guess from a British perspective, thinking about sports betting as innovation seems a little counterintuitive. But is there anything outside of the sports betting stuff? Has been are there any examples of innovation that you think that particularly impressed you? And also, how's to what extent has the government, the Nevada state government, supported Las Vegas through this period?
Oh boy, okay, we have a few questions here. So first, I don't consider sports betting to be the major innovation in the US. I have a completely different answer for you, although Simon has stolen my thunder just a little bit out of the Thunder from Down Under theater over there. And but the major silver lining in my mind that has come out of this is the way in which digital disruption has arrived in the gambling world in a way that it was really kept out for many years. As Simon mentioned, cash is king in gambling, almost exclusively worldwide, and with little exception. Perhaps if we carve out the online gambling world, we can see how this plays a role, but it's still very cash and fiat currency based. And now one of the big things that we've been able to do during the pandemic is really capitalize on the ability to see what digital and cashless payments can do. They offer the opportunity not just to provide for physical health protection measures, right? When we think about health and safety, it's not just a matter of physical health, but also mental health. When we consider how we can use digital payments, it allows us to know more about the customer. In a world where regulators are consistently demanding, and I think rightfully so, a number of different KYC measures, having everything in a digital space that is tracked allows for really a much cleaner space, whether that be touching cash, literally cleaner space, or much cleaner from a, say, AML or fraud perspective. We can also see how people are gambling, the idea of identifying problematic gambling behaviors, which has been now consistently demanded, and certainly by the Gambling Commission across the pond of late. That sort of activity is a lot more straightforward. I'm not going to call it easier. I think this is still very much a holy grail type thing. However, it is we're much further along the way into that space than we were. And I think that the big opportunity here is that this has allowed us to look into new ways of doing business. And I think that regulators especially have a really prime opportunity here to consider how they can create an environment for their operators and suppliers, developers, et cetera, to innovate in a number of different spaces, whether that be different compliance measures for, again, for AML, whether that be for things like, for us responsible for safer gambling measures. And the opportunity then that has to be present really is the opportunity to fail along the way. I think that that's something that we've done plenty of during the pandemic as we tried to test our way through different measures. And that has to be able to happen. Either you have to be able to accept unintended harms, because that's something that will happen as you continue to push here, or there has to be enough incentive to make a very long-term and careful development process happen. The good comparison measure here is, for example, here in the US, going through the approval process for a drug with the FDA is extremely expensive and time-consuming. And that's because they want to make sure the drug that goes out is not harmful. That process is then offset by the potential profit that you might make from drug patents. So we have this sort of ongoing dilemma here. Do you solve your problem, or do you just have this very prescriptive, don't make a mistake, don't make a mistake, don't make a mistake, and here's a big fine at the end? And to tie back here, this idea of digital disruption, our ability to look into how cashless payments can be present, I think we have the opportunity to do that kind of research. And I don't necessarily mean research as in my titles here on the screen, right? Director of research, all sorts of different testing that somebody might want to do with different products and figure out how this can be used for growth and consumer protection.
Great, and we're starting to get some questions through, and a couple of them on this whole point about innovation. One of the things that's quite interesting from a British point of view, looking across the pond, is that in Great Britain, most academic researchers involved in gambling studies spend their days plotting the downfall of the industry, whereas at UNLV you actually have you have people who are being produced by the university who are doing things like developing products. They're developing practical solutions to the challenges that the gaming industry's finding itself in. I just thought I'd give you a chance. Any sort of plugs you want to put out of any sort of particular innovations that are coming out of UNLV at the moment, and some of your...
Oh, what a fun opportunity. Shameless plugs abound. One of the, Dan, you had mentioned our Blackfire innovation space. This is a space that opened late January 2020. So it didn't get to live for very long before being shut down for quite a long time. This is a new space that is built around the application of research. So there's plenty still basic research that's conducted there, a lot of theoretical work, but the core idea there is that we're taking the research that's being done as it can apply to the real world. Right now, we have a very large hospitality and gaming space. This was the very first building. That was its core space. We have things like a research esports arena. We have a mock casino floor that includes a variety of the most recent games. There's sports betting space. There's a restaurant there where it serves as a test kitchen. We have chefs from around the strip who come and use this space as a test kitchen. There's the hotel room of tomorrow that is a smart hotel room, and it continues to develop businesses in that space as well. There's a large startup launchpad area within it, and it's really a fantastic space. If you're interested, please email me. We do virtual tours if you're not able to get over here anytime soon, and we do in-person tours when you are. The other major shameless plug, and I promise to be rather brief still, is we've recently launched a cashless payments research collaborative at the International Gaming Institute. And the idea is that we're looking at what are the impacts of these cashless payments on gambling as a business and gamblers themselves. One of the things that we were noticing is that cashless payments quickly moved during the pandemic. So here in Nevada, for example, the concept of cashless had kind of dawdled along for about 3-ish years until around the middle of 2020, when we still thought that everything was passed on by touch. Cash is dirty. We don't want that to be around us. And it took about 3 weeks after that to get cashless approved for gambling in the state. But more broadly in the United States, I think this is a familiar thing in the United Kingdom based on what Simon and David have talked about, is that policy has really been driven more by perception of what could be rather than by data and what is. And very little research actually exists on customer behavior in gambling when cashless is deployed. And so that's really what we're studying. What is and what isn't, and how can we make recommendations based on that? We have 2 major donors of data from cashless payment systems that operate in the United States. We are always interested in talking to people about more of that. If you're interested, again, please reach out.
Great, thanks, Beth. And I know you work with the University of Sydney on this as well, don't you?
Yes, we do.
Cool. Just going back to the Gambling Act review in Great Britain, we had a question here about whether, I'm sort of paraphrasing here, so forgive me if I've misunderstood this, but almost saying coronavirus has proved that, you know, online is the future, and sort of almost saying, shouldn't you just give up on your bricks and mortar? I suspect I know the answer to that, but perhaps, Simon, can you give me an answer to that in the context of what the Gambling Act, what you seek in the Gambling Act review, and how those things come together to produce something that might address that?
Yeah, certainly online gambling has benefited from people not being able to gamble offline. But I think as soon as we have now reopened, we've demonstrated quite clearly that a lot of people want the real world experience. And I think the way forward, I hate shopping, but I love going to shops where I get an experience. And if it's my day-to-day humdrum, Amazon any day. But when I want something special, I will go to and seek it out, and I will enjoy that experience. And I think gambling is exactly the same. And the online-offline convergence with gambling is fascinating, because to start with, it was the online people trying to do an offline experience with live dealer, with virtual casinos type of experiences. And meanwhile, the analog offline industry, such as ours, is stuck on balls and paper cards and things like that. If we get the changes we want, which are more slot machines, which are fairly easy, a lot of people want to play them, but the electronic random number generators, it'll actually enable us to give a sort of a real world experience of some of the online, more technically advanced products like Roulette X. And that indeed is actually already coming offline to live tables, and SG are doing a version, or Lightning Roulette or Roulette X, which we'll have a stadium setup of the sort of online game. And I think we are very gregarious. We are social animals. We want to come to a venue where we feel safe. We're having an experience, a buzz. We see lots of interesting people, and we can play the games which you can also get online, but in the real world experience. And I don't think anything will replace that. So we're looking forward to this next stage with gusto.
Thanks. And David, if I can ask you, to what extent do you think that politicians, commentators in the press, all the sorts of people that will have a bearing on where this review comes out, to what extent do you think they understand what you're trying to achieve? So not simply the reforms you're asking for, but the net effect of those reforms, and why these are good things for the consumer.
So in shorthand, I'd say probably better than ever. And one of the few good things that came out of last year was the level of political engagement with the land-based casino sector. We didn't wish it was that way, how it came about, but the kind of answer justified the workings. I think politicians do get it, and actually they make time and have come and visited our venues. And to sort of go back to the last question, this is a sector that employs 11,000 people. It's not a sector to be given up on. It generates £300 million in tax. So Simon quite rightly makes the points about real life venues-driven experiences, but casinos are incredibly labour intensive. Now, I think politicians get that. I think to an extent the media get that. And if you look at a lot of the hostility in the media, I think one of the reasons why perhaps casinos are not caught up in the crosshairs of that to the extent perhaps of other verticals, and I in no way seek to try to sort of compare and contrast, is that casinos offer an entertainment experience that transcends just transactional gambling. And I think people do understand that. It's not going to be straightforward in converting that to legislative change, but I think we're in a pretty elevated position when it comes to at least securing an audience with people who have the ability to make decisions.
Great, thanks. I've got a couple of questions here, which they're sort of some distance apart, but I think I can magically combine them. And I'll go to Brett on this first, but because one is directly to Brett, which is around the extent to which non-gaming growth in non-gaming revenue will or will not continue to outstrip gaming revenue as following this disruption. But secondly, and I think it is related, around the changes that are needed to attract a younger generation to land-based casino gaming. Perhaps if we can ask both of those questions to you, Brett, and then maybe come to David and Simon on the second element.
Sure. So as many of you or possibly all of you know, non-gaming revenues has been larger than gaming revenues in Las Vegas for many years now. I think almost a decade at this point. We started the crossover almost 20 years ago, and we've been long past that. I don't expect that to change dramatically. I think that that's something that is unique to a tourism destination like Las Vegas, where the core product really is tourism, right? That's what we export. We export tourism and hospitality. We don't necessarily produce something more tangible. And so as a result, when people are coming back, they're looking for all of those things. And I don't think that that will drastically change. I don't think gaming is going to come back as some big thing that storms back onto the scene in a major way. Certainly not here in Las Vegas, for example. I think that growth will be quite different in different parts of the United States. I'd mentioned sports betting earlier. That was certainly something that in many ways almost hit a perfect storm during the pandemic. It was the timing of the Supreme Court decision, the timing that it takes for state legislatures to start passing laws, and then what looked like a setback at the beginning of COVID when sport was put on hold came roaring back pretty quickly. We had sport once again just a few months later. Most were started up again by July of 2020. And so the ability to grow was substantial. And that's something that we're starting to see, especially as other casinos reopen. I do simultaneously want to add that there are, like in the UK, there are casinos that will not reopen. They haven't been able to. They're either formally closed or on permanent hiatus at the moment. So that is certainly going on. To then, I guess, pivot into the next question, Dan, which was, what about the next generation? That was the question?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that that's where we'll really see some of that digital disruption come into play. I agree with Simon. I agree with David. There's an element of the actual experience that has a major and lasting effect. Not everything can be done online. I can buy all sorts of things online, but I still don't get that same experience as I do when I go into the store. When I interact with somebody, when they say hello as I walk into the store and I go, oh, stop talking to me. I enjoy that. I like to think, oh, stop talking to me. I want to be able to try a pair of pants on before I buy it because I don't know if it's going to fit. All these little things, these intangible things are an incredibly core part of what experience is. And so there will always be an element of that. However, I mean, and I don't think I'm saying anything particularly new here. We live in a world where the most recent generations are growing up with digital access their entire lives. They're digital natives, the term we like to use. And so as a result, that's something that they expect out of the experience. So while you may still have a traditional gambling experience, the ability to bring in all of these new elements that have a digital existence are very important. This is not a plug, this is just an example, the example of Resorts World, which is opening in 2 days here in Las Vegas. What they've done is they've set up their mobile app so you can pay for everything with the app, not just gambling, but you can pay for any of your entertainment options. You can buy tickets specifically at that property through the app. You can make your hotel reservations, not necessarily a new thing, but everything is there. It includes the ability to access rewards, where their offers come from, making reservations at different amenities. The whole thing is that within that one payments app, it's all done digitally and it's all done for everything else that's there. They have digital login and cashless will be part of all of their different gambling games that they have available there. And that's all then run through the same system. So everything then is seamless, which is another big part of this digital experience. The ability to integrate that in is that it's always present and always there. Smart tables. So with table games, for example, they have RFID embedded chips that have probably the most accurate count that's possible. You're never going to be short on one of the dealer's tables. So the ability to have all of those elements there, that's starting to get us toward that space where you have the experience, but you've also integrated the digital element of it enough that it's familiar and accessible to a crowd that's interested in that kind of thing.
Great, thanks, Brett. And I should point out for the UK listeners that pants means something quite different in America.
Oh, yes. Trousers. Excuse me. My goodness. It's quite early
David,
here. Please forgive me.
I think we're almost out of time, actually. David, I know you wanted to come in on the whole point about innovation and attracting younger customers. Any thoughts from you?
Well, yeah, I mean, the other part of Rank's business is bingo, Mecca Bingo. And I have to say, this is a conversation that I have on the other side of the road, more so than I have in casinos. I don't think it's as much as a problem for UK land-based casinos in attracting a younger demographic, but there is no doubt that customers now are more discerning, they are more demanding, really. And actually, this lines up quite well with what it is that the sector is seeking through legislative reform. When it comes to, broader product range on random number generated games, when it comes to harmonization of slot numbers, I mean, ultimately that creates lower cost entry points. It has the potential to offer better value, exactly the same with providing sports betting. Young customers are not prepared to accept what was on offer a few years ago. They won't hang around in queues, they won't wait patiently, they quite understandably have higher expectations and want better value from a land-based experience. Now, ultimately, that underpins pretty much everything that we are looking for out of the government review. So it dovetails quite nicely.
Great. Okay, and I just thought, given I think we're pretty much out of time, I'm looking for Eva to contradict me, but maybe if we could finish off just very briefly by asking each of you for one wish as we look to the future. What's the one thing you wish and hope for? Perhaps come to Simon first on that.
Well, from a casino hat on, it is purely that we get a sensible review. It will unlock so much. It's perfectly fair. It is reasonable what we're asking for, to be allowed to modernize our product for all the reasons we've discussed. And I do think the politicians get it. And when I say to politicians, if you give us more freedoms, you'll get more casinos along the style of a hippodrome, which are multi-level, multi-strata, and appealing to all generations and all types of people, offering them that fantastic, fun, safe experience that people want. It's quite compelling. So a sensible review and change.
Great. And David, just preface this by saying Bolton Wanderers are not going to win the Premiership anytime soon. So please just bear that in mind when you give your answer.
Well, you say that, Dan, but we were 20th in League Two in February and we got promoted. So I think it's almost inevitable that Bolton Wanderers will win the Premier League within the next 5 years. So I'm not going to waste one of my wishes on that. Look, I agree with Simon, what it is that we want out of the review. But in order to get there, Dan, an awful lot is made about finding allies and silencing prohibitionists and all this kind of binary talk of the sort of landscape out there, whether it be media or political. I think the only thing that we would wish for as an industry is a fair hearing. And that includes some of the challenges and the criticisms that may need to come our way, and we might need to articulate some things a little bit better, perhaps around cashless or sports betting. But if you give the industry a fair hearing, then there can be no sense of injustice off the back of this government review. So that would be that, and European domination for Bolton Wanderers would be my joint wishes.
Very good. And finally, Brett.
in the spirit of the genie, I have 3 wishes. So first, I wish that decision makers, whether that be CEOs like Simon Thomas, whether that be legislators, whether that be regulators, whether that be clinicians or researchers like me, that we rely on a solid evidence-based foundation when it comes to developing theories, when it comes to developing policies. My second wish is that we're allowed to fail in that process. Not everything works perfectly the first time. And so things sometimes do indeed have to be tried and tested, and they don't always succeed. And when they don't, we move on to new things. And when they do, we embrace them and use them. And my third wish is for the Vegas Golden Knights to win our playoff game this evening and go on to win the Stanley Cup.
Very good. And no mention of Aston Villa there. Right, I think, well, Eva's just said we've got a couple more questions, but I can't see them. So we'll give it a second for them to come through, but otherwise I think we're almost there. I suspect if they don't come through, then you're all perfectly accessible people. That's right. You don't hide from the public. So maybe, oh, hang on. Here we go. Sorry. So there we go. We had it wrapped up, and now we've got this one. So how can we? Who do I put this to? Maybe Simon. How can we address customer confidence to increase patronage of land-based casinos?
By doing exactly what we're doing. The scared people are damaged. They've been mentally damaged by the government, and I think that is a crime against humanity that will come out. But they were the people probably weren't coming out much anyway. We're finding we are getting great patronage from people. We had people queuing to get here. We're getting sort of 50–60% of our attendance we used to enjoy, despite no office staff in the area, and despite the social distancing restrictions that are still there. The government are making it very difficult. I think if government switch from Project Fear to Project Confidence, that will help a lot. But bluntly, just by doing the job that we know we can do well, which is delivering great places for people to come to, and time will do the rest.
Thanks, Simon. And I thought we were going to end on a damp squib there, but we got crimes against humanity, so fantastic. Right, we really are done now. Thank you so much to Brett, to David, and to Simon. And now I'll hand back over to Eva for the conclusion.
Thank you, Dan. I don't think you shared your 3 wishes or your 1 wish, but I hope and I wish then to all of our panelists that your wishes come true. I wanted to thank you all for your participation. Thank you as well to our audience for the participations and for the questions. I'm sorry we were not able to answer all of them. As Dan, you were allowing some plugs, I'm going to add mine as well. So once again, please do check out ice365.com. Next week, the new website launching with a lot more on the opening and reopening of the land-based industry around the world. Brett talked a little bit about Resorts World. We do have some exclusive interviews with the executive team behind that opening, and they will as well talk, or they have talked to us about some of the technology that Brett mentioned as well. So once again, ice365.com launching on the 28th of June next week with a lot more content. So we hope to see you there or at one of our next webinars. So thank you and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.